Salutations, fellow thinkers and drinkers, and once again, those who like their purple deep. The first album with the Steve Morse era, Purpendicular, turns 30 this month, being February 2026. Where does the time go? However, despite the passing of time, I can still vividly remember buying this and playing it for the first time. Now, back then, sort of post Blackmore's departure, I had, to some extent, lost touch with all things Deep Purple. I was aware that Satriani had joined them for a tour or two, but I suppose I rather assumed that the band were effectively finished. For as good as the shows were, I'd heard a couple of recordings. I could never actually imagine him as a permanent replacement. Then came the news that they had recruited Steve Morse. And I must confess, the name meant absolutely nothing to me back in the day. Now, this was the early days of the internet. Does anybody still remember the news groups? And I heard, or I began to read reports, I should say, of shows in Mexico, Florida, India, and in South Africa. And the response, it seemed, had been largely positive. Now, by this point, I already owned the new Rainbow album, which Blackmore had recorded post his departure. And I found it to be perfectly decent, if neither exceptional nor especially original. Still, I think driven in equal measure by curiosity as well as expectation, I bought Purpendicular on the day of its release. I remember taking it home, disconnecting the telephone, opening a bottle of red, and pressing play. Now, as we now know, the album opens with Vavoom, I should say, Ted the Mechanic. A strange song title. But it is something of an extraordinary statement, is it not? It's a very off-kilter piece, I think. Funky, but instantly engaging. Playful, even. I suppose it immediately signals that this is not a band trading on past glories. No, we have never heard anything like this before, not from Deep Purple. The riff lurches, snaps with intent. Ian Pace sounds energized, re-engaged, and Gillan delivers a vivid character-driven vocal, I suppose say, but he talks it as much as he sings it on this one. Something he does on occasion I'm not always a fan of. Perhaps looking back, it would appear on this first song that John Lord is continuing his background role, to which he'd very much been reduced since the reunion, or for much of the reunion. But that will soon change. Of course, the most obvious point of interest is Steve Morse, isn't it, the new guitarist, and this is a very good way of introducing him. As it's probably one of the few actual riff-based songs on the album. But he certainly announces his presence, doesn't he? Not with excess, but most certainly with imagination and creativity. And it's, in hindsight, the perfect opener for the album. Not only does it introduce Morse, the new and very different guitarist, but it immediately underscores the fact that Deep Purple have been reborn. The next song, Loosen My Strings. I suppose one could call this a ballad, but I have to say this is in large part why I am a Deep Purple fan. This is how to write an effective mood piece. This is everything that the cringe-worthy Love Conquers All is not. It's moody, it's reflective, it's emotionally resonant. The song, it builds patiently. Verses are restrained, but it gives way to a very powerful, very melodic chorus. And again, I have to say, John Lord announces his presence here, and is very much to the fore on this track. And Roger Glover's bass line is exquisite. Some of his best playing ever, I think, on this song. Technically, perhaps, but it's just the way he carries and drives the song enhances the mood of it. Gillan is in really fine voice here, back to singing again. And he sounds very thoughtful, very assured. And Morse colors the arrangement with subtle textures on this one. And I have to say, this really is, for me, this is songwriting at its finest. It's mature, it's confident enough to let the mood and the construction do the heavy lifting. And I must say, in a saner and fairer world, this could have been a hit. And I suppose it does have crossover potential. But had it been a hit, the compromise would not have been the band's. It really wouldn't. This is no sellout of a song. Simply, it is one of the best songs the band have ever written. Okay, we move on to Soon Forgotten, and here really Lord does announce his resurgence. The song is dominated by his moody, menacing organ playing. Echoes of Deep Purple in rock? Well, maybe. It certainly is heavy. But it has got a very distinctive rhythm to it, I think. It gives it an almost a catchy feel to it. Having said that, it does have menace, it does have intent, and it certainly has momentum about it. And I think it shows that despite the eclectic nature of the album, that the band actually can still rock. It's modern in feel, and yet it's unmistakably Deep Purple. Which takes us on to Sometimes I Feel Like Screaming. What can I say? It's one of the album's emotional high points. Gentle, almost fragile opening, which blossoms into a soaring, cathartic chorus. It ranks among the finest moments of the band's career. Morse's solo is lyrical and expressive, and what's more, it serves the song perfectly. It is beautifully conceived, paced, and executed. It's a deeply affecting piece. And even now, 30 years later, it still remains the Morse era's signature song, does it not? It is simply magnificent. They follow it up with Cascade's I'm Not Your Lover, which does begin with, I think it's John Lord's humorous but utterly unintelligible spoken ramblings, which eventually gives way to a taut, assertive, chord-driven rocker. The groove is really tight and the arrangement disciplined. And Gillan delivers a lyric with conviction and some bite. I think Morse adds harmonic color rather than out-and-out flash on this one, which I think really reinforces the sense that this is a band working collectively, rather than just simply spotlighting individuals. And I have to say, this is another standout. The other quality this song really has is just so much damn fun. Why do they no longer play this live? Okay, The Aviator. Now this is different. And it's one of the album's most understated and, I think, revealing pieces. And it's a track that has a distinct Celtic flavor to it. It's built around a restrained, almost floating arrangement, and it really does go for atmosphere and texture rather than brute force. Lord's keyboards provide cool, slightly aloof harmonic bed, while Morse contributes clean, economical guitar lines, emphasize color and movement rather than riffs, chords. It's just delightful, isn't it? I mean, and Ian Pace plays with notable subtlety on this one, and it allows the song almost to drift rather than be driven. Gillan's in very reflective mood, both lyrically and in terms of his performance. It's an observational piece. I know he said it was inspired by Steve Morse, who was a licensed, qualified airline pilot. Well, we all need a hobby, I suppose. I suppose it is. It's an abstract character study in terms of lyrics. Very, very, very effective. Gillan at his best here. Again, it feels symbolic, perhaps because of that. Certainly not literal, is it? seems to be singing about a figure detached from the world below, admired yet envied, somehow isolated. Interesting. There's certainly a quiet melancholy about this, running through the entire song. It's reinforced by it's a measured tempo and a very uncluttered production. All I can say is an absolutely wonderful effort. Okay, Rose's Cantina. This is another offbeat effort. It's loose, it's swaggering, and it's infused with definite Latin flavors, isn't it? Touches of Hush from Lord on this one. I think you'll know what I mean. But the band do sound utterly relaxed, enjoying the groove. And it seems like they're just enjoying each other's company on this one. Pace and Lord, they really lock into a joyous rhythmic framework here, and Gillan delivers a lyric with charm and humour. Very much a reminder of the band's versatility and their wit. At the time, it was not an obvious highlight, but it most certainly, it grew on me very quickly, I have to say, and surprisingly effective live. Well, A Castle Full of Rascals, which is bright, it's buoyant, and it's deceptively sophisticated. It's hard and heavy, yet it's complex, and at the same time, a little reflective. And beneath its upbeat exterior lies a very strong melodic construction, an excellent interplay between the guitar and the keyboards. Rhythmically, this is very complex. It radiates confidence, and to my ears, it radiates joy. And in many ways, captures the spirit of the album. And this, sense of renewal, I suppose. It's another outstanding effort, and for me, a real highlight of the album. And sadly, they never played it live. Okay, A Touch Away. Now, this is intimate, it's restrained, and quietly beautiful. Reminiscent of something maybe Toto would have done. It seemed to be the impression I had at the time. But as I've mentioned before, if you're going to write a song of this nature, this is how you do it. And I'll repeat the previous comparison. This is everything that Love Conquers All was not. A softer track? Yes. Yet still, with character. It's not an obvious ballad. Gillan's vocal is tender, it's sincere, and Morse's understated playing really adds some warmth, I think, and real emotional depth to it. Not my favorite on the album, I have to say, but it demonstrates the band's ability to communicate this, their softer side without heading towards sickly sentimentality. Hey Cisco. Well, this was fun, wasn't it? It was quirky, certainly, inventive, full of character, built around an unusual but dynamic rhythmic feel. It sounds spontaneous and very much alive, as if it sounded like the band captured mid-experiment somehow. Again, showing the band unafraid, to follow odd, off-the-wall ideas simply because they find them interesting. Yeah, it does, and it works. It's another belter. Okay, Somebody Stole My Guitar, my guitar even. Perhaps the most conventional song structure on the album. And whoever said Morse could not write a good riff? It's a really effective, hard-rocking song. It's energetic, it's quirky, it's humorous, it's melodic. It serves as a good showcase for Morse, but also this is, I think, very much a statement of collective confidence. Again, as with just about everything on this album, the band sound invigorated, united, and joyful. The album closes with a Purpendicular Waltz, which is one of the album's most eccentric, I think, and revealing moments, built around a deliberately off-kilter sense of rhythm and tone. The result is something perhaps knowingly awkward, slightly sardonic, and maybe even quietly subversive. The arrangement remains light on its feet. Ian Pace maintaining a delicate balance between structure and looseness, allowing the song to sway rather than march. It's a great groove on it. It really has. And so like much of the album, this song feels deliberately unconcerned with genre orthodoxy. It's playful, it's literate, faintly odd, revealing the band confident enough to indulge in whimsy and experiment with form, without the need to justify themselves, or just create something that harked back to their past. Yeah, wow. What a great record. What a great record. Now, after all that, you may be under the impression that I am rather favorably disposed towards this album, and yes, you would be entirely correct. Once again, I can vividly recall how I felt the first time I heard this, and it's one of those paradoxes, is it not? I didn't know what to expect, but this was most certainly not what I expected. But my first impressions were that it was fun, it was compelling, it was challenging, and most unexpectedly, it was a joyous record. There was a curious sense, as a listener and a fan, of vicarious pride when listening to it. A strange feeling, perhaps, but it was just obvious that Purpendicular was not merely a successful comeback, but it really was a genuine creative rebirth, and almost felt at the time that one was part of it, in on the secret, as it were, that this band that had probably been written off were actually capable of coming up with something like this, and we knew about it. You didn't, but we did. It really was. We had absolutely nothing from like this before from Deep Purple. It was totally inconceivable had Blackmore remained in the band. I suppose, looking back after the 30 years, it was everything I dared hope it would be, and probably exceeded my expectations. I expected a reaction, something more along the lines that I had to Stranger in Us All. That, yeah, okay, it's a pretty good effort here. Nothing earth-shattering, nothing particularly original, but a good, solid effort. Nothing to be embarrassed about. But no. This was and is. It is creative, it is adventurous, it's brave, it's eclectic, and it is occasionally whimsical, and I love it from start to finish. And the decision to bring Steve Morse into the band proved to be utterly inspired. I have to say, his songwriting contributions, his ideas and playing are just incredible throughout. They could easily have opted for a Blackmore clone or a more conventional hard rock style guitarist. Instead, they chose to seize the opportunity they were given to create a genuinely new chapter in their history. And it was a brave decision, I have to say, but based on the strength of this, it was more than rewarded. Songwriting is consistently strong, the performances are inspired, the album just brims with ideas, with humor, and one has to say, with emotional range. Yeah. Now, in terms of production, it was again handled by Glover, and he really delivered on this one. It sounds warm, it sounds full, and it's resonant. No hint of processing. All the instruments do sound organic. All are well balanced in the mix, and something that I like, there is a good separation of instrument. You can hear each individual performer. He mixed it really well, we'll put it that way. Now, in commercial terms, this did actually do rather well in the band's traditional territories of Europe and Japan, although I have no idea as to actual numbers. Although, given their status already 30 years ago as a classic rock band, and the timing, the mid-90s, it didn't make much of an impression in America. Quelle surprise. As I've already mentioned, this album marked a considerable renaissance of Jon Lord. I really think one would have to go back to before the reunion to hear an album which not only reflects his ideas and songwriting and playing contributions as much as this album does. He had been criminally sidelined across Perfect Strangers through to The Battle Rages On. And it's nice once again to have to see his playing resuming its rightful place alongside the guitar and not being subservient to it. Now, as pleasant as that was, one has to be honest and say that this would sadly be the last time that Lord was so involved, I think, in a Deep Purple album. Never mind. Okay, we have to briefly mention the tour that resulted from the album, which obviously not only gave some sort of amazing performances, but yes, this was the one where they finally revitalized the set list. I've talked about that before, and I may do so again at some other point, but yes, it was around this time. This is where it all started. Are there any negatives? Well, yeah, there are one or two. Not necessarily related to the album per se, but perhaps more reflective of the band or where they were in their mind. If one accepts that Purpendicular had not only reinvigorated the band, then perhaps it would not be too much of a stretch to say that this had actually shown them the way ahead. Now, I have discussed Abandon, Bananas, Rapture of the Deep at some length on this channel, so please check out those videos if you want further information on that. But briefly, whatever qualities those albums may have had, or in some cases may not have had, I can't shake the feeling that the band somehow dropped the ball after Purpendicular. Not that I'm suggesting that they should have gone out and tried to replicate it. No. I think it's more to do with the spirit that informed the writing and recording of this. And I think that was noticeably lacking on Abandon, Bananas, and Rapture of the Deep. And I think that was a conscious decision. And I think it was the wrong decision. Indeed, it would take until 2013 with the release of Now What before they produced an album of comparable quality, at least in my opinion. And certainly it was not until Now What that they produced an album which resonated with me as much as Purpendicular had. The only other negative that does occur to me surrounding this is, and this goes back long before Morse left the band, is simply their manifest reluctance to play any of this material live, which I find very sad and very regrettable, and I don't understand. I really don't. Well, I suppose in closing, it was just a perfect statement at the time, was it not? And now, 30 years later, well, I think it underlines that the band, this was a band very comfortable in its own, if relatively new skin. They were no longer chasing, their former glories, but they were creating their glories on their own terms. Few veteran bands have navigated, I think, such a transition as this, that late in their career, with this much grace and vitality. In fact, I can't think of any. But to me, it just stands as, it's not only one of Deep Purple's finest ever albums, and I think it is. It really top 2 or 3 for me. It really is. It's proof that reinvention, I think, when handled with intelligence and conviction, it can be every bit as rewarding as revolution. Or maybe the revolution was Blackmore's departure, and maybe that was exactly what Deep Purple needed. Whatever happened after that happened. Not the point of this video. This is simply to say that 30 years later, and I still can't believe it's 30 years later, that this remains a remarkable effort, and it's one I never get tired of listening to. And I just wish that the promise that was displayed here had been more effectively realized. In the coming years. But never mind. That's all history now, is it not? Well, what do you think? Please feel free to like, to share, to subscribe, and all those good things, and obviously to comment. I know it's popular. Is it as popular as it is with me? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that one. Do you also agree that they did perhaps drop the ball after this? Well, food for thought, is it not? And, as usual, I thank you for your indulgence. I wish you well, and until next time, Mashonkia.